This is for you. It's supposed to be reflective. Okay, so I didn't really have a catchy title for this. I just decided to call it what it is. And this is going to be Pursuing a Fulfilling Life. That's what we're going to call it. And I've broken it into 2 sessions. And this is new. This is different than the approach that we took in previous years in the Rockstar Manifesto. This is more about evaluating the health of the different aspects of your life and then taking action steps from there. Right? So that's kind of what this is. So we're going to start with the sheet that I gave you, looking at the front side of this sheet. And this is what it looks like. And I thought about this for a long time. I didn't just, a lot of times teachers, and I've certainly been guilty of this, we will just make some catchy looking thing and put it on the screen and call it a universal truth. And I don't want to just be more noise, I was like, well, if I'm 17 years old, and when I was 17 years old, what would have been the best piece of advice for me going into the next phase of my life? And that question brings us to this idea. There is no one piece of advice. There is no one step process or one process. There is no 5-step plan and you're successful. But what there is that there is function and dysfunction. Right? There's health and there's dysfunction, right? So what I decided to do was, instead of telling you, the normal approach is here's all the things that you should be doing, and here's all the bad things that you're doing, and shame on you for doing that and you shouldn't. And don't get me wrong, decision making matters. I'm not going to lie to you and say that your choices don't matter, because let's be perfectly honest. If you could ask everybody on death row if they could go back and change 1 hour of their life, they'd be stupid not to do that, right? If they could go back and take back 1 hour or one decision, they would do that. So I'm not going to lie to you and say that your decisions don't matter. They don't have impact. In fact, one of the quotes that's had a huge impact on me, and it's weird because when I heard it, I think I was in college, and like most things, you just hear it and you're like, oh, okay, that's nice. That's a bumper sticker, and you just kind of move on with your life. And then it kind of haunted me a little bit, and so that's the first quote I'm going to start with is this. When it comes to decision making, you really have to be willing to accept the worst possible outcome of every decision. Okay, so let me explain it to you this way. You're always one decision away from a totally different life, right? And there's layers to that. That's a deep quote. You're always one decision away from a totally different life. And it doesn't necessarily mean a bad decision and you kill somebody and you're going to go to jail. That's obviously true. But it also could be, do I take that job or don't I? Do I agree to this thing or don't I? Do I take on this project or do I not? Do I agree to marry this person or ask this person to marry me? Do I move to this city? Do I go to this college or this one? Your life changes after you make choices. And that's not a bad thing. But once you walk through a door, you've closed off the options to the other ones. And so you decide to be a lawyer, let's say, and so you study political science and then you go to law school and you study for the bar. Well, you've basically made it a choice, and once you pick one direction, you've kind of shunned the other ones, and it should be the same way in your relationships too, right? If you decide to commit yourself to one person in a monogamous relationship, you should probably be shunning all the other options, right? Unless you're just a gaslighter and a sociopath. You should not be keeping your options open. So it's always skeptical to me when people are unwilling to commit, right? It's if you won't commit, if you won't make that official, if you won't declare it, and that's fine if you're still deciding, but that's the point. You make decisions, you accept the consequences, and you choose something and choose not the other thing, right? And so understand that your decisions do have impact. You're always one decision away from a totally different life, and you don't always know that, and maybe it's better. Maybe you made the right decision and you have a totally different life in a good way, so decisions do have impact on you. I'm not going to lie to you about that, right? You have to keep that in mind. You're reaching the point in your life where you're adults now. And this is what you've always wanted. And it's this weird time in your life. I get it. You inherited a system. You walked into this and it's toxic and weird and broken, and it's not your fault, right? This deal where you're supposed to be a 4.0 student and play 3 varsity sports and have no personal life and somehow keep your sanity and smile and act like everything's okay, right? That's hard to do. You can't spin 6 different plates at the same speed all at the same time. So that's kind of the direction I decided to look at. If I'm going to give you advice about a fulfilling life, we have to pay attention to health and growth. See, a lot of times people talk about success and failure. Do this, that, and the other, and this is a successful outcome. This is a failed outcome, right? Like coaches on teams. Well, we want to win a championship, and then you lose in the championship, and your season was a failure. Well, by definition, it was. But is that the right metric? Is that the right goal? Is happiness the right goal? Is that the right pursuit? So, we want to be healthy. We want to be fulfilled. We want to be content. And that's different than happy, right? And I'll prove to you what I'm talking about. Happiness is hitting the alarm in the morning. My alarm went off this morning. I'm not going to lie, I hit it once. I hit snooze. Happiness is hitting the alarm and not getting up and going to work or not getting up and going to school. That is what will make you the most happy in that moment. But it's not the healthy decision. That's just the momentary happy decision. All right? Like I said yesterday, doing crack will make you happy. Right? Doing ecstasy will massively increase the serotonin in your brain. You'll be over there petting the walls. You'll be happy. But choosing happiness, choosing comfort, choosing what you want to do is not the same thing as making the healthy choice. So what we want to do is shift the way we look at a fulfilled life. Happiness is sleeping in and not going to work. So I want to sleep in. I don't want to wake up. I'm not happy and willing and eager to wake up. But does sleeping in make me so happy or happy enough that I like sleeping in more than I like keeping my house? So I lose my job because I never go to work and I can sleep in as long as I want as a homeless man underneath a bridge somewhere. I mean, and that it's dramatic, but like that's the point. Doing what makes you happy is not always the same thing as the healthiest decision. Even partnering with a romantic partner is not always the healthiest decision. So the idea here is we're going to focus on growth versus decay. If you want to look at like a agricultural or horticultural example, like the flowers that you water and nurture, they will thrive and grow, and the ones that you ignore, they will die. Because I think there's another paradigm shift we have to make here. When we're talking about a fulfilling life, it's not just where are you well and where are you doing horrible. There's a whole fat space in the middle that everybody forgets about. And that's the complacency space. So what I decided to do, and you should do this a couple times a year. Really, you should do it about 4 times a year because things change, right? Your circumstances change. But I've given you a sheet that and probably in your life, in your stage of life, these would probably be a pretty good representation of the 6, I'm going to call them the arenas of life. The 6 arenas of life that are important. Now, mine looks a little different. Instead of academics, mine says finances and job. Right? Family for me is my children and my wife. For you, it might be your immediate family. It might be your parents and your siblings. So your situation will change. But the exercise is a good one. Even when you walk away from this place, even if you do it differently, this is a practice you should get into. Gauging the temperature. Evaluating the health of where you're at. Because a lot of people are in denial about things. And they're like, oh, okay, I'm doing kind of okay, but my grades are up, so I'm good. So that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to build some perspective on this. Like, what cost is too much? What if your grades are the best that they've ever been at the expense of your physical health, your mental health, or maybe even your relationships? It's not a healthy choice. And I get it. Again, I get it. It's like, no, you don't understand, coach. I got to go to this college, and it's like, that is the number one thing in my life. Okay, fine, I understand. Academics are important. They're on the board. There they are. But are they so important? It's not a hierarchy. It's not Maslow. Are they the most important thing? Are they so important that you can actually sacrifice mental and physical health for them? Right? If your academics are thriving at the expense of 2 or 3 other arenas of your life, what are you actually doing? And again, I get it. I understand. But maybe that's a serious thought that you need to have. So what I want you to do on your paper, don't copy someone else's, don't share it with someone else's, but I want you to take this seriously. Think about it. Maybe some of you don't even know what you want to put right away, but I want you to take a pen or a pencil, and next to each one of these boxes, I want you to rank the health and satisfaction of how these things are doing. Now, let me give you the scale. We're going to rank it on a scale of 1 to 10. You have it there at the top of the sheet. Now, here's how I've decided to define this. 10 being the healthiest that you can remember it ever being. So it's like, okay, maybe you were happier when you were 6, okay? Maybe the healthiest you've ever been. That's kind of what I'm talking about. 10 would be the healthiest that you ever remember it being. So you can't put 10 for everything, or like you're like actually on ecstasy right now in the chair. That's probably not realistic. So 10 would be the healthiest it's ever been. In fact, it's obviously a scale. Imagine them like dials. Like if 2 things in your life are the healthiest they've ever been, that's probably at the expense of some other stuff. So it's not likely that you have enough energy or time in your day for them all to be healthy. And you pick and choose, you make sacrifices. Everything that's worth having comes with a cost, right? And so if you want to increase your relationships or, make your family life thrive a little bit more, it's going to come at the expense of some other things, right? And, your relationship with your phone is not what we're talking about here, right? So maybe you spend, that's a thriving relationship. That's like a 10 out of 10. You've never been in more communication with your phone, but at the expense of going to sleep at night or eating food that have real calories in them and nutritional value, or maybe going at a normal pace, right? So if something that's not on this list is robbing something that's on this list, you need to evaluate that and make a change, right? So that's where we're going to go today. Today we're going to look at evaluating the health of the 6 different arenas of your life, and they change. And then tomorrow we're going to take some action steps about, okay, well, what happens when we need to make life change? Because a lot of people are like, change your life, fix your life, be better. What does that even look like? And what can I expect to happen when I do make life change? So tomorrow we'll do some action steps. Stay tuned. Don't disappear. Come back tomorrow. But physical health is not just, are you happy with your body? I mean, are you healthy? Diet, nutrition, sleep, exercise. If you find yourself drinking 500 milligrams of caffeine a day, you don't get enough sleep. You are objectively not healthy. Not like, I feel okay. Not the question. Are you healthy? Is this pattern that you are in destructive? It's like, well, I'm making it now. But can you keep this pace for the next 4 years? If not, it's not a healthy pattern. It's not a healthy rhythm. Because that's the point here. It's not about individual choices. It's about perspective and rhythm. It's about creating balance in your life. Rhythms and discipline. Discipline is greater than motivation every day of the week. Again, happiness is hitting the alarm and not getting up and working out. But health, thriving, functionality, ultimately a better life in the long term is getting up and not doing the comfortable, happy thing. So I want you to rank each of these 6. Physical health, your mental health. This is pretty self-explanatory, but I want you to actually evaluate where do you think that your mental state of well-being is at this point. Now it can change. Maybe it's different now than it was 2 months ago, right? In the middle of getting ready for finals and all that kind of stuff. Maybe it'll be different in 2 months when your sports season kicks into full gear and all that stuff. But where are you at right now? This is an evaluation. It's an honest conversation you're going to have with yourself. Don't copy from somebody else. Don't put some arbitrary number down. You can hide your answers, but be honest with yourself. You can't lie to the person in the mirror unless it's denial, right? So where are you at mentally? How is your spiritual health? Now that's defined as different things. Whatever metaphysical thing that's greater than you, that you put some hope and comfort in. For a lot of people it's philosophy. Maybe it's meditation, and maybe for you it's like the karma of what goes up must come down. Maybe you're a person who has some kind of religious faith, right? But you can't be the most important thing in your life, like the authority of all things. Like if you're the thing you're counting on, that's not good. That ship is going to go down at some point because you're going to run into problems you can't fix, right? So whatever that looks like to you, however you define that. And maybe it's not that important to you, so maybe it's a low-ranking number. But these are all just evaluating where you're at. So if you're going to make a change, you can take a realistic view. You can look at this and say, okay, what do we need to fix? What do we need to change? What can we do that's in our control, in our power? Academics, again, for a lot of you, your academics might be the healthiest they've ever been. That might be the only 9 or 10 on the list. And you're sacrificing your mental health, your physical health in order to keep your academics up there. Because you have a goal. And there's nothing wrong with having a goal, but your goal is like, okay, I'm doing this, and this is kind of the point of this seminar. I'm doing this because I have a goal, and it's to get into one of these 4 schools. And it's like, well, okay, that's an outcome. So you do all of this to get into one of these schools, and what if you don't? Was it all in vain? Was it a failure? In fact, you traded your health and well-being for something that wasn't going to make you happy anyway. And even if you achieved it, so even if you achieved it, it wasn't going to make you happy, but you didn't end up getting it anyway. So that outcomes are the problem. We want to focus on processes, being a healthy human, balance in our life. Where you go to college, it's a good goal. Don't get me wrong, but it's not going to make or break the fulfillment of your life. What job you do, that's not defining who you are as a person. It's not going to make or break the health of your life. So there's healthy and there's unhealthy. It's not just goal and outcome. We're going to talk about setting goals tomorrow, and there's process-based goals and there's outcome-based goals, and they're both necessary. There's a time for outcome-based goals, but most of your goals should be process-based. So if you want a New Year's resolution, if you want to make actual change in your life and you just don't know what to do, instead of saying things like, well, I'm going to be on a diet, or I'm going to go get a gym membership and work out 4 days a week, like that's too finite. It's not going to happen. You can't just change your behavior. You have to change your perspective on things. That pattern, that rhythm, needs to be a part of your commitment to physical health. Make your New Year's resolution, I'm going to focus attention and energy on my physical health. Part of that is going to the gym. That's sustainable because it's part of the goal. It's part of the emphasis. But you can't just go to the gym and neglect your sleep patterns. Neglect your nutrition. Not hydrate. Right? People who are gym athletes, they focus on their nutrition, macros, and all of those things. You have to sleep effectively. You can't make drastic life change in small incremental pockets only. And that's what we'll talk about tomorrow also, is like sometimes life change comes at a decent cost. Like people are going to resist you when you want to change your life. And so we have to decide today what needs attention. Maybe it's not drastic attention, but what do we need to focus on moving forward to be better, to be healthier? Right? So we're not going to focus on if you want to get into this school, do these 9 things. If you want to make $1 million, do these 9 things. We're going to focus on what areas of your life are thriving, what areas of your life are complacent, what areas of your life need attention because they're dysfunctional. So academics is pretty self-explanatory. Family life, again, however you define that. But I separated family from relationships because relationships are people that you choose. Your family you're tethered to. And there's something kind of deep about that. It sounds bad to say it that way, but it's a significant thing to acknowledge there are people in your life that you have a relationship with not because you chose them, that you're stuck to them, they're blood. And that's a different kind of relationship, right? But there's also something to be said for the people that you choose to be in a relationship with. And for some of you, that's probably friends, the 3 closest people to you that aren't your family. For some of you who are in committed romantic relationships, maybe that's a significant other. Right? For me, that's my family is my immediate family. Relationships would be, the most important one would be my wife, and then, friendships after that. So I want you to rank these. Give them a number from 1 to 10 for each of the aspects of this. And at first we're going to unpack why. Why did I decide to go this route? Why not just talk about breaking habits, and why not just talk about, how to change your life? Well, I think it's important to start at the very basic essence of change, and that is paradigm shift. You can do a lot to change your life, but maybe at the expense of your health. So your New Year's resolution is going to be, I'm going to study a lot more. I'm going to be a better student. Maybe that's not the right focus. Maybe you need to focus on your mental health. Maybe it would actually be more dysfunctional to be a better student because you have more pressing things that need your attention. So you don't want to ignore something that needs your attention. So why is it important to evaluate our well-being? And how often should you do it? I would say probably every couple of months, at least twice a year, maybe 4 times a year. Right? Because sometimes you're in a dark place. Sometimes you're better. And just in your head, checklist. This is as good as I've felt in a while. And the real important reason, there's a couple important reasons, but the important reasons to evaluate the aspects, or let's call them the arenas of your life, is one, where am I putting my focus and attention? Where am I putting my focus and attention? A comparison of the health of the various arenas of your life tells you where your passions are, tells you where your intentionality is, tells you what you're focusing on. If you're focusing all your energy on academics, it's probably costing some of the other arenas of your life. So you can say this is important to me. Family is the most important thing. That's false, apparently. If you're a person who's religious and it's like, well, this is supposed to be an important part of your existence. You're neglecting your spiritual journey so that you can be the best possible student you can be. It's like, is that the right path? It doesn't mean it's one or the other. That's the point. What's getting too much attention and what's not getting enough attention. So if you're like, think about your friendships, that's an easy thing to focus on. Because you choose that. Those are the people you choose to spend your time with, choose to spend your energy on. Those are the people that are like, oh, these are my friends. I enjoy hanging out with them. That doesn't come as a chore for me. Exactly. That gets intentionality. That gets pursuit. So maybe some other areas of your life need some attention, right? So it's not just where are you putting your attention. It's also like, okay, we don't want to be in denial about what we're complacent on. Because complacency is dangerous. It's not just, it's dysfunctional, so let's fix it. It's also like, you need to be careful because something's on autopilot here. So once you put those numbers next to these 6 arenas of your life, I want to show you the other side of this sheet looks like this. And we're going to break everything into categories based on the number that you gave them. Of course, this is like subjective and arbitrary, but it's supposed to be your own evaluation of how you're doing. The goal, of course, is to thrive. If you gave the number 8, 9, or 10 to any one of these categories, I would put that in the thriving category. If you self-evaluate, this is really healthy. This is the healthiest I remember it being. My friendships are great. They're supportive. I feel good. I'm happy. Maybe that's a 9. You're in the best relationship you've ever been in. You've never been happier. Things are going great. You've been dating for a while. Good. Because it's not just, we don't want to ignore things that are thriving. Again, the plant example. You have to keep feeding the flower. You got to keep watering it. It needs sunlight. You don't ignore things that are thriving. Just like you don't ignore things that are dysfunctional. And those two are obvious. I'm doing really well or I'm doing really poorly. But I think one that we neglect or fail to discuss, and I think this is probably maybe the most important one. What are the arenas of your life that are on autopilot? What things are not bad, they're not toxic, they're not dysfunctional, and those are the easy ones to ignore because you're like, it's fine. It's not bad. Nothing needs to change. I don't have attention or energy. And it's like, okay, maybe that's true. Maybe that's valid. But at some point, being complacent, being comfortable, lacking action is not going to make it healthy. This happens in relationships all the time. Like what happens if you have a 4, 5, 6, or 7? I put the most numbers in that category. And obviously it's a spectrum, so if it's a 7, it's close. You're close to thriving. But I intentionally had you do this before I told you the number scale because I don't want you to like fudge it. I wanted you to just give it a number and then we'll put it in a category. Complacency is a silent killer. The path of complacency a lot of times leads to destruction. It leads to dysfunction. I want you to think about this. In a dating relationship or a marital relationship, think about how people fall apart. It doesn't, in most occasions, it doesn't instantly become toxic. You don't go from happy and good and thriving to fighting and throwing things at each other. It's a slow, complacent, comfortable slide. And I'll be honest with you, I'm just going to, again, full disclosure here, there have been times, my wife would tell you the same thing if she was standing right here, where we've probably been complacent in our relationship, especially in 15 years of being married. And it's easy to not notice that. Things are good. They're not really good. They're just not bad. It's not the same thing. Things are meh. It's not the same thing as things are thriving. So you don't pay attention when things are comfortable, and you get complacent. And when you don't give attention to something, you're not nurturing it. And that's one of the number one silent killers, I think, of interpersonal relationships. Not even just romantic relationships, is a lack of attention. A lack of effort for the health of the relationship. It just withers. And you're like, well, people fall out of love. People change. Well, do they? Or do they stop focusing on the health of the relationship? And that's a paradigm shift too, because even when you're partnering with people, you're like, well, I'm going to find the person who just fits all of my needs. And it's like, well, good luck with that. Find the perfect person for you. And even if you manage to find the perfect person that checks all of your boxes, how many of their boxes do you check, homie? Uh-oh, you ever think about that? You narcissist. A successful, happy relationship is not about finding the perfect person. It's about both of you having compatible traits and compatible goals and focusing attention and energy on the health of the relationship. When you focus on the health of the relationship, it will thrive. I got to be honest with you. This is kind of a personal story. Spill some tea here. It's not really that, but it's oversharing. But it's an appropriate situation here. You know, I quit coaching football several years ago, and when people ask you questions like that, there's obvious answers that are just easier to make. And you say things like, oh, well, it just takes too much time, which is not false. But the fact of the matter is that I had come to the conclusion by doing something very similar to this evaluation that a lot of the facets of my life that were important to me were on autopilot. Because a lot of my attention and energy was being put into that, was being put into coaching. And it's not a negative thing. It's not a bad thing. It wasn't dysfunctional. That's what I need y'all to understand. It wasn't toxic. And I wanted to keep going. So here's a good piece of advice for you. Sometimes the healthiest decision is not the most comfortable decision. And sometimes you're not choosing between a good thing and a bad thing. Well, duh. Well, I can do this one good positive thing or this one obvious objectively bad thing and look at me go. I'm such a great decision maker. No, but are you mature enough to choose the healthier option of two good options? In fact, it probably took me more than a season, more than a calendar year even, from the time that I knew that I should quit coaching football before I actually decided to do it, because I rationalized for months. And I came to the point where I was like, I'm not going to put my wife in a position where she feels like she has to give me an ultimatum or be supportive, because things in my life, the priority balance was out of whack. And so I don't say that to get too personal with you or tell you that everybody's the same, but like that's the long answer. I didn't get tired and burned out. I wasn't ready to quit and walk away. I recognized that there was an unhealthy balance in my life and that other arenas of my life needed attention. So sometimes you have to make choices for the health and sake of the arenas of your life. That's a drastically different metric than saying, here's how you achieve your goals. I want you guys to see the difference there. The focus of health and well-being and then ultimately happiness is on the arenas of your life that have value, not on where you are. It's not your job that's going to make you happy. It's not a person that you're married to that's going to make you happy. It's not a place that you live that's going to make you happy. None of those things are going to make you content and fulfilled. The aspects of your life that matter are different than the assignments and titles that you have. You are not a lawyer, and that's your identity. That is your job. And when your job becomes more important than your marriage will fail. So if your job conflicts with other things in your life that are important, you need to be mature enough to say, I love this job, but not so much that I'm willing to sacrifice other arenas of my life. And that's something a lot of adults struggle with. They make choices because of complacency. That's the point I'm making to you. It's not dysfunctional. We're not fighting. Everything's fine. She understands. I work, she works. We have separate lives. We're good. You're not good. You're just not bad. But if you sit in complacency long enough, it will turn into what? Dysfunction. It'll turn into dysfunction. You don't accidentally get healthy. Just like you don't accidentally become successful. You don't accidentally become happy. It takes effort, energy. You have to focus on health. Physical health requires supplements, diet, sacrifices in your schedule. You have to pay attention to it. If you get sick, all the other things stop. And you got to take medicine, you got to rest. It's a good example. At that moment of your life, let's say you get COVID or the flu or something, your physical health arena becomes the one that you have to pay the most attention to. And guess what? You're not at school. So you have to take some attention away from your academics in order to get yourself better. And that makes sense to you, but you have to do that with all of the arenas of your life that matter. At what point are you going to sacrifice something for the sake of your mental health? At what point are you going to sacrifice something for the sake of relationships that matter to you? You got to think about that. Now, maybe it's a 7, and you're like, okay, I feel pretty good. It's not terrible, but it's not thriving either. It's not exactly as good as it could be. But the fear is the destruction, the dysfunctional, right? And look at the difference. It's a slide, right? One goes into the other. That's why they're arrows. Complacency is attention is lacking. Maybe you're on autopilot. Or maybe you're just neglecting to pay attention to things that need to be addressed. If you don't address things in the complacency category, they will become dysfunctional. Patterns that aren't killing you now, metaphorically, will become destructive. I'm in control of my drinking, it's not a big deal. I'm in control of my vaping, it's not a big deal. Sexual promiscuity, it's not a big deal. Now, yet. But at what point is that going to become dysfunctional? And at what cost? So again, choosing happiness might be drinking as much as you want, whenever you want, or vaping nonstop because it makes you feel good and it's satisfying, or having sex with any willing participant, which a lot of people would do. That's what happiness as a decision-making process looks like. But it's not healthy. And we know the dopamine trap, it's not going to make you fulfilled, and that cycle will never stop. So it's like, yes, if you value a sexual relationship more than a functional relationship, you can have that. Or you can have both by focusing on a healthy, committed relationship, which is very fulfilling. Because I got news for you. If your relationship is dysfunctional, you're not going to be very attracted to each other. There's not going to be a lot of passion there. There's certainly not going to be a lot of love and attention there. There's going to be I don't want to fight, I don't have the energy, let's go to bed. That's not a good place to be in. And that's why when you're complacent, you start to get bored. And when you get bored, you start to get destructive. And we'll look at that tomorrow when we turn these 3 categories into paths. They're all journeys. They're all tracks that you can be on. So dysfunctional is pretty obvious to recognize. Sometimes we're in denial. We're like, okay, I know my mental health is on the decline. I don't have the time or the effort, the energy to pay attention to it. But you need to. If this area of your life is a 1 to a 3, it's extremely dysfunctional. It's unhealthy. It may be due to trauma, which again is not your fault. You can't control circumstances always. We're not trauma blaming or victim blaming. It could be trauma. It could be life choices. Maybe you're an idiot and you did a bunch of dumb things and now you got mature and you're trying to figure it out and you're trying to pull yourself out of that dysfunction. That's great. But you created a problem and now you're going to have to fix the problem. Maybe you didn't even know. Most people are unintentionally dysfunctional. Most people aren't like, watch this. I'm going to be toxic to my kids and gaslight them so they have intimacy issues later. It's like, no, they don't realize how dysfunctional they are. But I need you to understand this. Dysfunction breeds more dysfunction. You will default to what you know. If you don't like it, You need to do something different. So that means recognizing dysfunction when you see it. Dysfunction breeds dysfunction. Immediate and intentional measures need to be taken for any arena of your life that falls in that 1 to 3 category, or else it's going to be unhealthy. It may cost you your life. If your mental health is a 1 to a 3, that's actually dangerous, right? So let's kind of place some importance on this. Why does this matter? Well, because we're setting our goals the wrong way, and we're focusing on the wrong things, and we're focusing on the wrong metrics. It's like, some people are like, I don't need to change my life. And it's like, well, you don't need to change some aspects of your life. But if you really did an actual evaluation of your health, there's some things in your life that you do need to change. It doesn't matter if you're okay with it. It matters if it's healthy or not. See, that's really terribly narcissistic that you at 17 think that you know what's good for you later on in life. And you're like, this is fine. Well, maybe you're practicing becoming a pretty good sociopath and you're controlling people and you're doing really dysfunctional things and you're going to become an expert at that. And that's not fine. So if your metric is, I don't feel bad about this, you need a different metric. So don't be so stubborn and naive and ignorant and stupid to think that this is fine. And somebody asked a good question in the last class. They were like, well, how do I know what is the healthy decision even if I want to make the healthy decision? And that's a great question because that brings in the balance for everything. Well, if your friendships and your family arenas are solid foundations, then people that love you and want the best for you can give you good advice. If you don't trust the advice your parents are giving you, there's probably not a thriving level of health there. If you don't trust that your friends are giving you good, solid advice, there's probably not a lot of health there. So it's like, who do you defer to? Who gives you advice? Who do you listen to? I advise myself. Well, you're an idiot if you're the only person. Like, if you're the most important thing in your life, you will die very soon. That's not a good situation, right? It sounds dramatic, but you can't be the most important thing in your life. Because then the only thing that matters is doing what makes you happy. No, you have to have something beyond yourself to give you purpose. Again, happiness is turning the alarm off. But fulfillment is getting up, doing the responsible thing, and going to work so you can have the kind of job in life that you want. Immature people sacrifice long-term fulfillment for momentary happiness. That's bad decision making. Prefrontal cortex. Impulse control. You have to walk away from a good thing sometimes so it can lead to a better thing later on. Immature people sacrifice long-term health and function and contentment for momentary happiness. And that's the right word for it, is immaturity. If you knowingly will do something that will make you happy for the next 15 minutes, creating a pattern of destruction that will affect you for the rest of your life maybe, or even the next couple years, that's bad math. It's bad math, right? So we have to change our perspective on things. What's your goal in a relationship? It should be to be in a healthy one. Oh, I like him. Why? Because he's pretty to look at. Your goal should be to be in a healthy, functional relationship. Don't do toxic things out of immaturity. That's sociopathic. It's one thing to realize a relationship is unhealthy. I don't like you anymore. Do the honorable thing. Cut them out of your life and walk away. Don't become a psychopath. Here's the thing. If you think, again, more teenage narcissism, and again, I've been there. But I'm saying it that way to crack through some of you who think that you know all the answers because you're intelligent. And you are intelligent, but it doesn't mean you have perspective on things. I've been in your chair at this very same school. It doesn't mean we're the same people, but we've had similar experiences. And I have more perspective than you. You're just going to have to trust me on this. If you think that the decisions you're making, especially in your romantic relationships, are not going to affect you later on in life, you're dumb. You're dumb if you think that. Every time you give somebody your heart and they smash it, it heals, but it creates a scar. And you're creating baggage, not just for yourself, but for others. And see, this is what sociopaths do. This is sociopathic behavior. If you're so unempathetic and controlling and manipulative that you try to hurt people, or you fail to recognize how your actions are hurting people because you think it's funny, and you think that's not going to haunt you later on? Because one of two things happens. If you're a manipulator and you control people, or you hurt people for fun and entertainment, you're either going to feel remorse for that and destroy somebody else's life in the process, which is unnecessary, or, and this is even worse, you're going to find out it doesn't affect you, it doesn't bother you, you don't have empathy and remorse, in which case you're going to keep doing it. In the world, the possibilities are endless. If you're a sociopath who's intelligent and you can abuse people to get your own way and you don't feel bad about it, oh, the world is your oyster. You can manipulate and gaslight and control your way to whatever it is that you want to get. So either outcome is bad. If you're doing sociopathic things to other people who are vulnerable with you, you're either going to create damage and feel bad, which is going to create damage in you and them. Or worse, it's not going to affect you at all, in which case it's going to solidify the sociopathic behavior. Don't do it. Don't cheat on people. Don't get complacent and bored and start flirting with somebody just to play mind games with your significant other and get attention. Don't walk through the hallway and airdrop nudes. It's funny, It's toxic, though. It's sociopathic. There are consequences for those actions. Somebody else is going to be the emotional victim from that decision. And all you see is your role, and it's funny. What you don't see is the damage that you're doing. Don't do that. Be mature enough to walk away from a relationship and not light the place on fire out of spite. It's sociopathic behavior, right? When we look at the health of parts of your life, we have to understand that outcome-based goals are temporary, and they're fine, but they're not life change. Beginning with the end in mind is not the strategy. You need to focus on the health of areas of your life, not specific goals. Is it healthy? Is it complacent? Or is it dysfunctional? That's what we need to focus on, right? The goal should always be minor but permanent lifestyle changes. And this is the thing, I think, where people miss the point. It's like, oh, I have a New Year's resolution. I'm cutting out sugar from my diet. And it's like, well, until when? Until I lose 10 pounds. And then what? That's a short-term goal. That's not a life change. So goals have their place, but they're not the same thing as life change. Your goal should not be, I'm not going to eat donuts again, because guess what? You're going to eat a donut again, or 5. And then you're going to feel guilty and beat yourself up. It's not the right goal. Your goal should be, I'm going to focus on my health. And that's a spectrum and a scale. And then you don't have to go into a state of beating yourself up because you ate a donut and violated your diet. Diets don't last forever. That's not a permanent life change. Stop making temporary changes. Permanent, but minor life changes. I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week. When? You don't have time for that. You're going to have to get up earlier. So if you're going to commit to your health, you can't just commit to one aspect of your health. You got to commit to all of it. Small, permanent life changes, lifestyle changes, right? This is a quote that's on the door. You see it subconsciously every day when you walk out of here, and I'm hoping it just like primes you and subconsciously sticks, because I very much believe this, and I don't know who said it. But people do not decide their futures. That's a fallacy. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. Again, decisions matter, but rhythms matter more. It's about the health of the arenas of your life. Now, this is where we're going to kind of bring it a little bit into some focus. I don't want you to walk away from here feeling attacked because of things that are outside of your control. Yeah, but you don't understand. You don't know where I've been. You're right. There are things that you can't control, and we need to acknowledge that. It's not your fault necessarily. But there's a difference between circumstances and your responsibility. What happens to you and not because of you might be your circumstances. But you still have options. You still have choices. So we do have to focus, and we'll do that tomorrow in our action steps. How much control do I actually have? What can I actually change? Because we do have to focus on, okay, maybe my family life is really unhealthy, but maybe it's because of things I can't control. Maybe it's because of trauma I'm trying to work through. Therapy that I need but I can't get because my parents don't support that. It's important to acknowledge those things, but not ignore them. You have to keep things as healthy as you can control until your circumstances change. Don't make your circumstances permanent, because you can definitely make them worse. If your family life is bad, don't neglect the other 5. Because someday you're going to want to move out of your parents' house, create a thriving and healthy life, but you're not going to have options because you have no academics, you have no friends, you have no drive, and destructive behaviors. So I understand and I can acknowledge that it's not always things that you can help. You're not the source of all your trauma. I get that. It's not always your fault, but it is always your responsibility. You have options. You're not a hapless victim of circumstances. There are things that you can do. So here's the conclusion. Whether or not you realize it, you are on a path. And tomorrow we're going to put those paths into 3 categories. You are aiming at something. And not acknowledging that you're aiming at something doesn't mean that it's not true. So by taking the temperature and evaluating the health of the arenas of your life, you can realize which direction you're heading in. Are you heading to a place that you want to be in? Are you ignoring it altogether? Are you going down a very destructive spiral? Right? So you're aiming at something. Right? And you need to understand where you're going. Look at the 5 closest people to you. And again, you can't always control that. Maybe your family life is very dysfunctional. It's not in your control. But that's where you're headed. So maybe you didn't voluntarily get in the car, but you need to get off the road. And as soon as you have the option to, go a different way. Go a different way. Right? So tomorrow we'll take some action steps